Christa, thank you for joining me on 20-Minute Leaders. This is so great.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's a lot of fun.
Such a pleasure for me. Biotech, leadership, startups. Let's just get started. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
So my journey is very interesting. I tell a lot of people that my motto is not all who wander are lost, because I have always meandered a little bit in my career, and I tell a lot of people early career, mid-career, or late career that that's okay. And we're in a time in history where I think that more and more people have multiple careers during their career, and I think that's a really important piece. So I started out working on communication plans and working on ways to help companies be more effective, usually in a time of crisis. And then I moved into startups. In the mid-90s, I helped a startup, which was very different from how it is today. I remember the first time we used email. It was this really big deal in the office. I remember the first time that Monster came on board. I want to say it was maybe 96, 97. And it was this, this big deal, you know, in terms of careers and values and how to find people and how to bring talent on board. So that was the theme. I started with crisis management. I moved into startups, and then I started to do some turnaround work as well. So
a little bit about crisis management. What does that mean, crisis management?
Yes. So at the time, I did some work for a company. So I've also meandered between being a full-time employee and a consultant. So at the time I was a consultant, I was actually finishing my undergrad. I worked full-time as I was finishing my undergrad. And one of my clients, they had an issue with their product where I won't get into details, but they created a product that was chemically based. And viscosity changed to the point where they were emitting gases, and then they had to create a report. They had to go report to EPA, and the scientists, this was for the head of R&D at the time, and the scientists were very demoralized. I don't know how else to describe it. That sounds like a strong word, but they were very, you know, it's when you work on something for a really long time in R&D, and then one little thing happens, you always know in the back of your mind that there's a risk for that. But until it happens, you don't know how it's going to work out. So that is one piece of that crisis management, where you have a deep bench of talent that's been working on something that's critically important for the organization. Something bad happens, everybody put it in the risk management plan, but once it starts, you go through your mitigations and your steps, but you have humans you have to be thinking about too. And you have to lead them so that they have the space to react and to work through the problems on their own as individuals. You need to keep them cohesive as a group, and you need them to stay focused on the vision and the mission, what you're trying to do, to say, this is now the step forward. We still have a plan. Let's stay aligned. Let's get moving forward.
So having seen different crises unfold and helping companies through them, what do you see are some of the pitfalls, or what are some of the things that would enable a company to power through a difficult crisis versus not power through? And I'm sure you've seen both ends of the spectrum. I
have. Leadership. I know that sounds like your typical plain vanilla garden variety answer, but it's true. Typically, so there's a couple ways that companies or teams can get into crisis. It's either what's going on externally and your ability to manage that internally, or what's going on internally and your ability to manage that, and then what's going on internally and your ability to make sure that the external factors either don't infect it and make it worse, or you can actually turn it into something that could strengthen the team and strengthen the organization and help them move forward. So I think that there are a variety of factors that contribute to that crisis management. We're seeing a lot of it now. Today, it's a great example of what many companies are doing, what many small businesses have to do.
Yeah.
And so that leadership really matters. And I want to say also, leadership doesn't mean you have to be a CEO. You know, we have a lot of parents right now that are really flexing their muscles as leaders.
Yeah.
We have community leaders, we have organizers, we have people who have an idea and then they decide they're going to do something about that idea. And now they have people they've stirred passion and they've stirred energy about, and now those people are following them. Well, now we have a leader, and we have a leader leading in crisis who can keep people motivated, focused, passionate, useful. People are feeling more valued and useful. That's a lot of what it takes and you see that with turning around businesses, that's what it takes.
Definitely. Okay, so let's move on to biotech and tell me from the, that you're the scientist and you, what is it about biotech that excites you and how is it different, this biotech industry from, the regular industries that we hear on TechCrunch every day or Forbes or whatever?
I love that question. I love that question. Even my students, when they first come in, so I teach at Northeastern Biotech Enterprise, and they're master's students and they're scientists. I have some business students who come in too, and they come in and they always say, I'm not a business person, I'm only a scientist, and that's the question I pose them is, let's talk about what's different first when it comes to biotech. So if nothing else, you can value and appreciate the uniqueness of the industry. So I've been in a few other industries. This is my favorite one, and there are a couple of reasons behind that. The first reason is because you're doing unusual and miraculous work. In biopharma or the medicine aspect, you're doing it for a patient, either for diagnosing, staging, screening, therapeutics. That's for a patient. There's a human that's going to benefit because of the work that you're doing. In biofuels, in environmental, there's all sorts of biotech out there, and you're taking something that has a biology base. Something has something related to life, and then you're bringing it into hopefully improve life, right? So how amazing is that? So biotech's so different. And the second piece that I like a lot, and folks I think in high tech and other industries will appreciate this, is you cannot sell your product until you've proven it works the way you say it's going to work and it's safe. So those, I'm grossly simplifying it, but those are the two pieces that really make it different. So, I remember working in, so I've worked in financial management, I've worked in engagement management, I've worked in consulting, a whole host of other things, high tech. How many people in high tech, we all know things get released.
Sure.
Maybe they shouldn't have been released at the time they were released. Maybe you're almost through some kind of user acceptance testing, but you've released it, and then comes all the fixes for the bugs. That can't happen in medicine, or at least we try to reduce that as much as possible.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm really curious about. So I'm a software engineer, and I really enjoy working on user interfacing products where I get to release something every day, and sometimes it breaks, and that's also fun because I get to learn from it breaking. But it sounds like in the biotech industry, that's not really a route that I could take. Just move fast and break things, the old Facebook motto. How do you navigate and balance this both agile, lean startup model with a product that has to really be bulletproof?
Yes, so that's what the research is about. Once you've discovered something, and there's steps that you have to take, and that's where that discipline focused steps come to pass. Because when you're looking to do something with the human body, you have to remember that the human body is smarter than we are. If it's healthy, it's more efficient than we could ever be. If it's not healthy, it's not as efficient, and we might not understand where the efficiencies are broken down. And so whatever you do with it, we've all heard of that case where you fix one thing and 3 other things fail.
Yep.
Things harder. So in biotech, we're trying to not do that. They're large molecules, which means that the barrier to entry into a cell usually needs a different mechanism in order to make that work. So there are, we discover something, we say, "Ooh, I think we have something." We work through different models and different testing, and then it goes through, depending on what the therapy is or what the diagnostic choice is, it goes through a very specific discipline, and it goes through this rigor because you want to be sure that it is safe. You want to be sure it's doing what you expect it to do. And during the research, that's clinical trials research, you start off small, and then you hit that milestone, and you go to the next trial. Okay, more people, we're changing our dose, we're seeing what the tolerance is, we're seeing what the endpoints are. You hit that one, you hope, and then you move into the final phase. And again, sometimes it's different because if you're working in gene therapy, you're changing people's genetic
Sure.
composition, or sometimes you're just using something to drop it into something else to then attack something genetically. But this is what the rigor is all about. And this is what a lot of scientists and medical professionals are talking about, especially today when they're talking about the rigor that's required for a vaccine, for a therapy, even for the diagnostics out there.
Yeah, sure. And it sounds like the life cycle then from idea to product to selling, it's much longer than in many other industries. So you really need to have partners that really accept that, right? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of investors or in terms of people that you bring on board, there has to be an understanding that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it might take a few years until we actually bring something out there.
That's right, and that's where the science comes in, because science is science, and many times you might understand it quite a bit and still something happens that's unpredicted. Many times a lot of things happen that's unpredicted, and that's how it should be. That's how you learn. That's how you understand the value of your asset. That's how you understand the value it could have in humans or in animals. There's a lot of companies, biotech companies, that provide therapeutics for animals as well. So that's what the process is all about. Now, I will say that it used to take 10 to 15 years in order to develop an asset, and sometimes it still does, depending on the complexity and also depending on the precedent, because if you're doing something for the first time ever, there's a lot of learning that takes place. We have a lot of instances now where companies are coming together to shorten some of that time frame, or they're using data differently. They're working with their regulatory agencies to say, well, if we can extrapolate data from this particular study, or because of what this product did and how significantly equivalent our product is to that one, are we able to condense, or are we able to combine, or are we able to make more efficient some of these trials so that we can still prove along the way that it's safe and efficacious, that it's doing what it says we expect it to do.
Definitely. No, so it's so interesting for me to be speaking both to a professor, but at the same time an entrepreneur and a leader. So what are some of the things that, as you watch these, young, hungry, new, upcoming leaders and entrepreneurs and scientists walk into your classroom, you're an educator. It's not just, giving them information and having them spit it out. What are some of the mindsets that you're trying to instill in them as they go through this journey of becoming, an entrepreneur later on, or a scientist later on?
Yeah, I love that question, because I really do view my job, my professor job, as someone who's indoctrinating a lot of the students.
Right.
So,
yeah.
First and foremost, it has to be about the patients, and that's what I talk about every step of the way. And the joke that a few of us say in industry is that if it's not for the patient, then it's just a science project. And that's not meant to be a pejorative with science projects, because those are really important. That's what happens with discovery. But in this business, if you're in the biotech business, as a business, your end goal is to get it to a patient and to impact that patient as positively as possible. So that's first and foremost. The second piece is making sure that our scientists have enough business understanding so that he or she can raise their value, raise their competitiveness, raise their imaginative views of what they're capable of doing, and then their realistic views of what they're capable of doing in our industry. Most of my students are between the ages of 28 and 32 years old. A lot of them have already started in industry, or they've completed higher education in a different country, or even in this one, they've come over because they want to advance into a professional master's of science in biotechnology. So I'm working already with students that have that background. They're typically very deep in lab, and they're trying to say, how do I at least learn more about what I need to learn about? And my whole thing is, let me indoctrinate you so that it's about the patient. Let me make sure that you understand that what is required, that as you're making your upstream, as you're doing all of the important, incredible work here, that you're thinking about a regulatory pathway, you're thinking about the medical affairs team, you're thinking about medical science liaisons who have to be talking to key opinion leaders in industry, you're thinking about what it takes to get your product through a clinical trial. So even now in my company, we look at a lot of early stage bioscience companies, and once we view what the science is all about, it's an incredible possibility that's so complicated that we say, well, it's going to how do we get that?
Yeah, I love it.
It's just, we're just not there yet, technology wise. And you see, like even gene therapy, 35 years ago, gene therapy, everyone was saying, oh no, I don't know, gene therapy. Yes, gene therapy was around. It was hard to get it past this stage here. It's just very complicated. We're now in a situation where the technology's there, the knowledge is there, the understanding of disease is much better, the capabilities are much better, the funding is crazy. So it's easy to get something that's so complicated, figure out what you can do to simplify it. If you can't simplify it, then augment the delivery because of what's available now from a technology perspective.
Incredible, incredible. And I can't believe 20 minutes is almost up. This went by way too fast. But I do have to then ask, coming from an outsider's perspective, I'm thinking of biotech, and it's very difficult from somebody who doesn't understand biotech and the industry to really understand the magnitude of what's happening. So maybe can you give me your 2 cents of where do you see this industry headed, or what are some of the most important milestones that we will achieve as humanity and as scientists, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, that we can hope to look forward to?
Sure. I think one is that the diagnostic rate is going to get much better for a lot of different diseases. Right now we have latent diseases that people don't know about until it's very severe or near deadly. So latent diseases such as lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, cancers where you don't find it until something's really wrong and the patient knows something's really wrong. So I think that that's one piece. I think another piece is obviously the therapeutic side of it. We have a lot of diseases that we still don't completely understand. We're in the midst of a disease right now, or at least the virus.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't understand the virus, and therefore we don't completely understand the disease that it causes. Yeah. So, I think that there's going to be a lot of discovery there. I think that people will just become more excited about science and medicine. And I'm really looking forward to that, because I think that the more people, you're a great example. So you're saying, I don't really know that much about biotech. After this 20 minutes, my hope is that you say, wow, I think I know something about biotech now.
And I have the curiosity to now go and examine further.
Yeah, well, there's so much out there and so much available to people. It should not be a black box. So I think that that's the third piece. So I talked about the diagnostics piece, the therapeutic or the cure. Right. I think the third piece is that it's time to demystify biotechnology, and that's a big part of what I do. It's a big part of what I do in industry, but also what I do at Northeastern. That it's just, business is a process. I tell my students that all the time. Business is a process. You can demystify it once you understand the different components of business. Biotech has a layer on top of that because there are multiple functions and regulations for good reason that other industries don't have, but it's still a process. It doesn't have to be this unwieldy, crazy, complicated process. You just have to know how they all fit together and how they work so that you can get that product over to the patient. So I think that's the third piece that we're going to see, and one that I think is an imperative, and that is to demystify biotech. It sounds really sci-fi. It is really sci-fi. Yeah. You wouldn't believe what's going on in industry right now. But there are ways to make it very accessible to anybody out there who's interested.
I just love your passion about this. Christa, before we leave, I need 3 words that describe you best, or 3 words that your students or your colleagues would describe you as.
Passionate. So that's one you get a lot. I think the other another word is tenacious. So if something's worth grabbing onto and figuring out or not letting go until it's been done, I think that's the next piece. And or the next word, and I think the third word is just human. I highly regard my humanness, my faults, my flaws, my happiness, my enthusiasm that can sometimes be too much for people. I know how to dial it down, but I think there's something to be said about celebrating your humanness, whatever that might be, and it's part of what connects us all together, and it's part of what makes us so unique as well. So those are my 3 words.
I'm just so curious to see how you run a board meeting from these 20 minutes. That's one thing that I'm definitely curious about, and maybe one day we get to collaborate and I'll be able to sit in on a fly on the wall in one of those. Christa, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for the time, and I'm so excited to see where everything is headed.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.